Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 327 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about my issues with quarterback competitions in the NFL. I like football and the NFL as much as the next guy. It's the most popular sport in this country, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And it's covered by the media far more than any other sport. And I understand that's what people want. But one element of that coverage that I have never cared about is quarterback competitions. Every year when training camp starts, all the sports shows zoom in on these perceived and often made-up quarterback competitions, and this year's batch of quarterback competitions I find extremely uninteresting. The three that most people focused on was in New England between Jacoby Brissett and Drake May, the Broncos between Bo Nix, Zach Wilson, and Jarrett Stidham of all people, and the most talked about one, the Steelers between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And yes, there was technically one in Oakland, but no one even dared pretend to care about that one. The first one is the one I've already talked about on this podcast, is the New England Patriots. They have the number 3 overall pick, Drake May, and they are at least going to start the season sitting him and going with Jacoby Brissett. Now, what's making people really upset about this one is the comments made by new head coach Jerod Mayo. I mean, he is at 1 minute saying Jacoby Brissett is the clear starter, and then the next minute he's saying Drake May had a better training camp. Well, what is the clear answer? Now we know that Jacoby Brissett is the starting quarterback, and it is driving New England fans up a wall. I never for a second really believed that Drake May had a chance to be the starting quarterback. They brought in Jacoby Brissett. He was probably given this job with the idea that he was going to be the starting quarterback, at least to start the season. But this has absolutely nothing to do with where Drake May is at as a starting quarterback. He is still better than Jacoby Brissett. This is just about they don't want Drake May to play right away because of the perceived idea that he was given the job or some other nonsense. Yes, Jacoby Brissett is a pretty uninspiring choice for a team starting quarterback, but this always felt inevitable. The best case scenario for the New England Patriots is they have a rough start to the season, then by the middle or the end, they go to Drake May and things start to look better, so you begin to see that Drake May is the future of the organization. This first season means absolutely nothing. I talked about this when Mac Jones was the starter as a rookie. It doesn't mean anything. It's about developing him into something that is consistent, that you can rely on year in and year out. There's going to be some rough patches, but at the end of the day, if you begin to feel good about Drake May by the end of this season, that's all that matters. Winning games right now, I mean, this discussion of who gives you a better chance to win games, winning games should not be the main agenda of the New England Patriots right now. Developing Drake May into the franchise quarterback has to be the number one mission of the organization moving forward. I think the saddest of these quarterback competitions was the Broncos. So they had Bo Nix, a rookie, Jarrett Stidham, who we know is not very good, and Zach Wilson, who was an outright disaster with the New York Jets. And now I'm supposed to act surprised that they're going with Bo Nix, the one who I haven't seen play bad football before. The only thing I find interesting about this situation is not the quarterbacks themselves, but Sean Payton. I mean, Sean Payton has to turn this guy Bo Nix into something better than Russell Wilson, or he is going to be made fun of till the end of time. I mean, we think of Sean Payton as a quarterback whisperer because of what he did with Drew Brees. And I will give him credit, he was winning football games with Taysom Hill and Teddy Bridgewater. So yes, there is a chance that he's able to get good play out of Bo Nix. But all the talk about this competition, I mean, what's the competition? The Denver Broncos were never going to start Jarrett Stidham, and they were never going to start Zach Wilson. No one is ever going to start Zach Wilson ever again. No offense to Stidham or Wilson, but they're not even good enough to be placeholders for the future franchise quarterback. So one thing that really does anger me about these quarterback competitions is how the head coaches play along at the beginning of this. I mean, the media, they act like they are giving them what they want, but in the end, their words mean absolutely nothing. The Patriots were always going to start Brissett, and Peyton was always going to start Bo Nix. They wasted our time acting like anything else was even a possibility. What would have been wrong with Jerod Mayo at the beginning of this offseason or the beginning of training camp just outright say Jacoby Brissett is our guy? No, he wanted to make things more interesting. He wanted people to talk more about the Patriots, so he said things like this is an open competition. These like vague terms that mean absolutely nothing to anyone. And then don't even get me started with the media coverage. As a Patriots fan, it's just so insane how these media reporters say these things like Jacoby Brissett is getting all the first team reps, so there is no competition. I understand why you have to say things like that, but it's not as interesting as you're making it out to be. You're just describing the practice. Not to get all Allen Iverson on you right now, but come on. We're talking about practice, not the game, which is not what I'm interested in. I just don't find all the talk about these competitions interesting at all. And how these coaches come to these decisions is obvious. And that gets us to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You don't bring in Russell Wilson to be a backup. He's won a Super Bowl and been to another. That would be a big distraction on and off the field. And Justin Fields has an 11-29 record in the NFL, and I know the argument. He was with the Chicago Bears. Wilson was and is going to get every opportunity to keep this job because I think Mike Tomlin is in win now mode. I don't know how much he cares about developing Justin Fields because I don't think he views him as the future franchise quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In fact, I believe Justin Fields is there to just be insurance for Russell Wilson because listen, it didn't work out with Kenny Pickett. We didn't have any quarterback. Now we have two quarterbacks, and we know that one is serviceable and this other guy might be. Fields, to me, is an interesting topic to talk about because all last year, Mike Greenberg, who I believe is one of the best sportscasters in America, was talking about Justin Fields every day on his show Get Up. So he is making a bigger and bigger deal about this quarterback competition because he believes in Justin Fields. But how much of a competition was it really? Now, I know Justin Fields didn't play very good in the preseason, but my argument would be Justin Fields never had a chance to be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They wanted to be Russell Wilson because they want to win football games, and Russell Wilson has a very good history, whether you like it or not, of winning football games. In the last season with the Denver Broncos, I think he was very good, and then he was benched. The first year with the Broncos, that was the disaster year. Last year, Russell Wilson was a more than serviceable starting quarterback. We all know the quarterback position is the most important, and these teams that don't have a definitive franchise quarterback are probably not going to be very good this year anyway. So why do we make such a big deal? Who cares who their quarterback is? Of the three teams I've talked about, only one I think is even capable of making the playoffs, and that would be the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that has nothing to do with the quarterback and everything to do with the fact that Mike Tomlin is their head coach. No matter what's going on with these teams, everyone was just honing in on who the quarterback is. The media talked more about the competition between Drake May and Jacoby Brissett than the fact that the Patriots traded away Matthew Judon after a contract dispute. That is something you should be talking about a lot because they traded away who a lot of people perceived as their best defensive player. And this obsession with quarterback competitions isn't anything new. I remember the height of it. It must have been what was going on with the New York Jets back when they had Mark Sanchez and Tim Tebow, two massively flawed quarterbacks, but all we could talk about was that competition between those two. Oh, Tim Tebow is right behind Mark Sanchez, so that if he messes up, we're going to go to this celebrity quarterback. I weirdly believe this is why nobody's backup quarterback is any good, because if you have a halfway decent backup quarterback and a not so great starting quarterback, then all the talk becomes about, well, when is this guy going to take over, like Mark Sanchez and the Tim Tebow situation. We're all just left wondering, remember when Cam Newton lost the job in New England to Mac Jones, and the Patriots didn't even think about keeping Cam Newton as the backup because they didn't want all the media coverage of, oh, their former starter is now the backup. Backup quarterbacks used to be these guys who used to have a history of being starting quarterbacks. Now there are just these guys who are lifelong backup quarterbacks, or these big draft busts who will never get another opportunity to be a team starting quarterback. I'm just not a big believer in some guy who earned the job in training camp and preseason, especially in modern day training camps and modern day preseason. Are you watching these preseason games? They mean absolutely nothing. So what if Justin Fields had a few fumbles in a preseason game? He was a turnover machine in the regular season. You already know everything you need to know about Justin Fields. He wasn't all of a sudden going to play miraculously during a preseason game where we go, oh, Justin Fields, make him the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers immediately. And I'm not kidding when I say this. People create these like mythical stories about these young quarterbacks winning these jobs. There are still people who cover the Patriots who say, well, Mac Jones won the job over Cam Newton. No, he didn't win the job over him. He was drafted with a first-round draft pick. Him becoming the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots was obviously going to happen. I mean, had you watched Cam Newton the year before, who would have been excited about them going back to Cam Newton? I don't think Mac Jones just lit it up during training camp and preseason to a point where the Patriots said, oh no, we have to go with this guy. No, they were going to go with him the minute they drafted him. So you might be asking, what is the difference between that Patriots team and this Patriots team? Well, I believe the key difference is Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is the guy who is trying to win every single football game. I don't think he was thinking in the long term. So he was thinking short-term success with Mac Jones. And I think that's how that all played out. That first season with Mac Jones, the Patriots were able to be a playoff team. Mac Jones was a really good rookie. And then after that, things began to fall apart because he didn't seem interested in the long-term development of Mac Jones because he probably knew he wasn't going to be here for the long-term development of Mac Jones. Where Jerod Mayo knows he is going to be forever linked to whatever happens with Drake May. I mean, think about it. Not that many people are really out there blaming Bill Belichick for what happened to Mac Jones because Bill Belichick is the one who has the history of winning all of those Super Bowls with Tom Brady. Nobody cares. It's not going to tarnish his legacy because Mac Jones didn't work out. He's still going to be recognized as the best head coach in the history of football. But the career of Jerod Mayo might come down to, is Drake May a franchise quarterback? So I believe that Jerod Mayo is clearly more interested in the long term with Drake May than he is in the short term, and I think rightfully so. I think what the media doesn't realize is that quarterback competitions are not interesting unless both quarterbacks are really good. I think they all think that they're all like Joe Montana and Steve Young. That was interesting because both of those guys turned out to be future Hall of Fame quarterbacks, all-time great quarterbacks, and at one point, the San Francisco 49ers had both of them on the roster. That is such a rare case. I mean, most teams, they have one guy who is possibly a starting quarterback, if that, and then the backup is usually just another guy. And I will point out that these quarterback competitions are only coming down to quarterbacks who are not making a lot of money. I mean, the guys who are making the $30+ million, there's never a quarterback competition for those jobs. The Giants aren't having a quarterback competition against Daniel Jones because Daniel Jones is making an absurd amount of money and they don't want to bench him because he's making that money. They want him to earn that contract. Him keeping that job does not mean he's having a great training camp. It doesn't mean he's having a great preseason. It means that he's making a lot of money and the Giants want him to play out that contract. And when he does play out that contract, guess who's not going to be their starting quarterback anymore? Daniel Jones. And why there was a perceived quarterback competition in Pittsburgh has everything to do with the fact that Russell Wilson is making minimum money with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He already got his money from the Denver Broncos. So people see that number and they go, oh wow, there's a real chance that the Steelers could just walk away from Russell Wilson. I knew the minute the Steelers brought in Russell Wilson that he was going to be their starting quarterback, at least for the start of the season if they are winning football games. Mike Tomlin is in win now mode. He hears all the noise, oh, he's never had a losing season, and that's great. He's never had a losing season. But then there are people on the opposite side who go, well, he hasn't hasn't won a playoff game in forever. We need to go back to being the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are known for winning Super Bowls, not just being mid. My point is, I believe you are going to see less and less of these quarterback competitions because the starters on these teams are going to be making so much money. They are going to be the starting quarterbacks no matter what. I mean, no high-priced quarterback is going to lose their job unless they're completely terrible in the regular season. I mean, how could you even bench a guy that's making $45 million? That's just never going to be the case. But the media has talked about these guys because, oh, look, Justin Fields is making no money. The Steelers could bench him. Oh, Russell Wilson is making no money. The Steelers could bench him. Jacoby Brissett, that's $8 million. Nobody cares. I know a lot of people are mad at these teams for not naming a starting quarterback sooner, but I blame the media more than I blame the teams because the media is trying to turn this into real coverage. They're trying to really turn it into these competitions. Oh, what's the competition between the Patriots looking like? How soon could Russell Wilson lose his job? I mean, I get it. That's what the media has become. That's what ESPN is. That's how they make their 24/7 sports channel. That's great. But even when they are having insightful conversations about these quarterback competitions, it's like, don't you guys realize that these conversations are deeper than the quarterback competitions themselves? I don't believe that much thought is going into the decision of Jacoby Brissett being the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. In fact, I believe there was a handshake agreement from the beginning by Jacoby Brissett and the Patriots. He said, I'll come to your team that's really bad if you make me the starting quarterback at least to start the season. I thought that was always going to be the case because why would Jacoby Brissett be here in the first place? He's an average guy who probably just wanted a starting position and he saw one in his old home in New England, so he's like, fine, let's make this work, but make me the starting quarterback. And that was an agreement. That's just my take. I believe that it was an agreement that Jerod Mayo was never going to break. In the case of Sean Payton, I always believed he was going to go with Bo Nix because I think he wants to go back to being known as the quarterback whisperer. Oh, some people doubt Bo Nix, but then here comes in Sean Payton who gets him to throw 30 touchdowns this season. That's the type of story that Sean Payton wants. Sean Payton never wanted to reinvent the career of Russell Wilson because he wouldn't have gotten as much credit. But if he turns Bo Nix into a franchise quarterback, we'll all go back to calling him the best offensive coach in all of football. Now, if we're talking about who are you rooting for this season, Sean Payton and Bo Nix or Russell Wilson, I am rooting for Russell Wilson. I believe this is a guy who has a lot on the line. This is a guy who's still looking to become a Hall of Fame quarterback. This is a guy who's won a Super Bowl, who I thought was pretty decent last year with the Denver Broncos and did not like how that organization treated him on the way out. I want the Russell Wilson revenge tour. I want Russell Wilson to lead the Pittsburgh Steelers to the playoffs, possibly the AFC title game. I mean, could you imagine what the media coverage would be like if Russell Wilson leads the Steelers to a Super Bowl appearance? See, those are interesting things that the media should be talking about, not whether or not he's going to get the starting job. You don't bring in Russell Wilson to sit him on the bench right away. You at least see what he's got left in the tank. Nothing important, I believe, is ever decided during training camp and preseason. I mean, come on. Look at what's happened with modern day preseason. Nobody is paying attention to these games. Nothing special is happening. Mac Jones is lighting up the preseason with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Guess what? Their starter is still Trevor Lawrence because Trevor Lawrence is the franchise quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is the one they gave a bag of money to. That's all that matters. That's how they decide who the starting quarterback is. Who's the guy we gave a lot of money to? Oh, that's Trevor Lawrence. Go back to him immediately. Oh, Daniel Jones is playing really bad. Well, we can't move on from him. Oh, why? Because we gave him a boatload of money. I really don't know if I'm in the minority on this. I just don't find all the talk about who's this team's starting quarterback all that interesting whatsoever because it always comes down to quarterbacks who you don't really care about. I mean, come on. Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham, and Zach Wilson? You think that's interesting enough of a quarterback competition to talk about that more than 90 seconds? I mean, what are we doing? And I feel bad for these guys constantly being asked if they're going to be the starting quarterback. I mean, Jacoby Brissett was more relieved after that press conference when he was announced as a starter than when he made the $8 million. I mean, it's just gotten to such a ridiculous point with all the talk about who a team's starting quarterback is going to be. I want to live in a world where we never use the term quarterback competition again. And I know that's never going to be the case because we love to write these stories, oh, this guy won the job. I don't even like the aftermath conversations where people go, oh, did this team make the right decision? Well, you're not going to know anything at least until like week 5 of the season. I mean, if Russell Wilson has an 0-5 record with the Pittsburgh Steelers, then they'll move on from him and they'll go to Justin Fields. This podcast was a long way of saying I'm just out on quarterback competitions in general. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.